If I had known I was Ace, I don't think I would have had a child.
If I wasn't a parent, it would have taken me longer. A lot.
I want my son to know about asexuality and romantic.
I realized, oh, damn, that's me. I was lying to myself for years.
If you add queer aspects, it's not taking influence because influence is taken anyway.
Chaire.
Tervetuloa.
Salvete.
Salamat datang und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Ace Around the Cake, dem Podcast von und für A-Menschen. Ich bin Lotta, meine Pronomen sind they, them und ich bin asexuell und aromantisch.
Ich bin Franka, meine Pronomen sind sie, ihr und ich bin asexuell und heteroromantisch.
Ich bin Alan, meine Pronomen sind er, ihm und ich bin aro, ace und queer.
Hello and everybody, welcome to a new episode of Ace Around the Cake. Ihr wundert euch bestimmt, warum ich jetzt gerade auf Englisch angefangen habe. Tatsächlich haben wir heute eine Premiere und zwar werden wir unsere Podcast-Folge zu einem großen Teil auf Englisch aufnehmen. Aber das ist kein Problem, weil wir nämlich im Nachhinein auch ein Skript für euch anbieten werden, sowohl auf Englisch als auch auf Deutsch. Bevor wir jetzt aber inhaltlich starten und ich euch verrate, worüber wir heute sprechen, werden wir erstmal ein neues Teammitglied in unserem Podcast vorstellen, und zwar Momo. Hallo Momo, schön, dass du heute dabei bist.
Hallo, danke, dass ich hier sein kann.
Ja, Momo, magst du dich vielleicht kurz vorstellen? Also wir wissen jetzt schon, dass du Momo heißt, aber magst du vielleicht noch kurz was über dich sagen, deine Pronomen, vielleicht deine sexuelle und romantische Orientierung?
Genau, meine Pronomen sind they, deren und ich identifiziere mich als qua aro ace und wohne in Frankfurt. Ich rede einfach weiter, ja, also. Ich wohne in Frankfurt und studiere hier Geschichte an der Uni, an der Goethe-Universität. Und ja, ich forsche sehr gerne zu Aro-Ace-Themen und das ist auch eigentlich der Grund, weswegen ich es so toll finde, heute hier zu sein und Teil von diesem Podcast zu sein.
Dazu auch gleich eine Frage, wie bist du eigentlich auf unseren Podcast gekommen, oder? Ja, weil wir sind natürlich immer sehr neugierig, wenn Menschen etwas von unserem Podcast erfahren, ja, wie du auf die Idee gekommen bist, bei uns mitzumachen dann.
Ich weiß nicht mehr genau, ob ich das über Mail erhalten habe oder über Instagram gesehen habe, aber ich glaube, es ging über einen Social-Media-Post vom queeren Jugendzentrum hier in Frankfurt am Main, dem Kurs 41. Und da war ich entweder auf Instagram habe ich das gesehen oder über den Newsletter. Und habe mich total gefreut, weil ich mich immer freue, wenn es Podcasts über queere Themen gibt, gerade auf Deutsch, was eigentlich eher eine Seltenheit ist. Und ja, bin seit Folge 1 dabei.
Voll schön. Toll, dass du jetzt hier dabei bist.
Ja,
Sehr
magst
gerne.
du vielleicht noch kurz erklären, welche Rolle du im Podcast einnehmen möchtest in Zukunft? Was du tun möchtest?
Ja, ich habe mich bereit erklärt, zusammen mit euch die Transkripte für die einzelnen Podcast-Folgen zu bearbeiten und hoffentlich irgendwann auch mal hochzustellen, damit einfach mehr Menschen den Podcast und die Inhalte genießen können, wenn möglich auch auf Englisch, sollten die Folgen auf Deutsch aufgenommen worden sein oder umgekehrt. Und ja, das läuft gerade für alle vergangenen, alle zukünftigen Folgen. Außerdem helfe ich noch so ein bisschen bei der Recherche mit und bin ja auch heute hier dabei.
Ja, voll schön. Herzlich willkommen auf jeden Fall nochmal offiziell hier in unserem Team.
Vielen Dank, ja.
Genau, du bist heute auch bei der Aufnahme dabei. Damit machen wir dann jetzt gleich weiter. So, now I'm going to switch into English because the guests that we have on our podcast today also speak English. So, welcome again. Yeah, what's the topic of today? Lotta, what are we going to talk about?
We're talking about a-parenting, about being ace or aro and a parent.
Yeah, exactly. And what's important to say, if you record a podcast on a-parenting, of course you can record different perspectives. So we can record perspectives of people who do not want to be parents. We could record perspective of people who try to be parents, but who face different challenges because our society makes it a lot easier for allosexual and allonormative people to become parents. But in the end, we chose to record our podcast with people who are already parents. So today we have two guests. The first one is Simon, and then we also have Carmen. So welcome on our podcast.
Yeah, maybe to get started, you can tell something about yourself if you want to. Maybe you, Simon, want to start. Who are you? What do you like to do? Or something that people can imagine who you are.
Sure, yeah. I prepared something. Sure. So, yeah, Simon. Pronouns are he, him. Abo, Ace. I'm English, but I've been living here in Germany for 15 years now. I've been a web developer for 25 years. And for the last year and a half, I've been making my own science fiction podcast called Tests from the Future.
Very interesting. Everyone who's listening to that podcast episode, check Simon's podcast out as well.
Yeah, Carmen, maybe you want to say something about yourself?
Hello, I'm Carmen. I'm also known as Dastenna, Dastenna. And well, I'm 40 years old. I'm ace and agender, and I'm white from Germany. And I'm working with the Spektrum podcast and doing the illustrations for the podcast. I was one of the people who designed the mascots for the podcast, Aaron and Ace, and and I'm illustrating for work, illustrating books and and doing archaeological drawings for excavations. And and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram and DeviantArt, and also on Patreon.
Yeah, thank you for presenting yourself. We're very happy to have you here. And yeah, you both have children. That's the thing that we already know about you. But maybe you can tell us a bit more about your children, about your personal situation. Maybe when did you find out for yourself that you are on the A spectrum? Yeah, Simon, would you like to start?
Yeah. What was the first thing? So I have one child, my son, 10 years old. My personal situation is 2 years ago, my ex-wife and I separated, and about half a year after that, that's when I learned about what asexuality and being aromantic is. I hadn't even heard the terms before and didn't know what they were. So learned about them, about a year and a half ago, and then a few months later recognized that about myself. And so that's made my life much nicer and easier. What were the other things you had that you asked?
Yeah, I mean, you already said that you have a child, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about how you found out that you are on the A spectrum.
Sure. So I can't remember the exact reason now, but sure, I searched for the word asexual. That led to the Avon website, and there were some simple definitions, and when I read them, it was a clear match. Like, it wasn't confusing. I read it, I was like, oh yeah, that describes how I am and how I have been my whole adult life. But just because I hadn't been aware of it before as a thing, I didn't know it was a thing to be,
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah, I imagine it must have been difficult for you since you were already married, as you said, with your wife at that point, and you already had a child. How did it affect?
So I didn't. So I learned about it after we had so about half a year after we separated. Then I learned about it. Sure, looking back on my marriage, it had an effect, meaning the way I was had an effect, but I did not, hadn't gone to counselling or the like, so I hadn't come across the term. If someone had told me about being ace, being abo, maybe I would have recognized it, would have spoken with my ex-wife about it, but as it was, I learned it all after we had separated. Since we actually did finalize our divorce, she and I have discussed it. That was nice. It cleared up a lot of things. But okay, I did not learn it soon enough. I didn't learn it while we were married, is the point.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Carmen, would you like to tell us a bit more about your story?
Yeah, well, I'm parent to one child as well. The child is 10. And I realized that I'm ace when the child was 3 years old. Yeah, 2016. When I was 33. And it's a bit of a hilarious story, because I was researching for a story I was writing, because one of the characters behaved in a strange way. This was the way I was talking about this back then, and I wondered what's wrong with him. I'm making
quotation marks.
Quotation marks, yeah. And I stumbled across the term asexuality in German, and thus I found the German Avon forum and read through some of the topics there, and thought and wondered, I remember some of these stories. They sound similar to what I'm experiencing, but no, that's not me, because I'm researching. I'm a typical heterosexual person. That's not me, and it took a few months and some exchange with one of the administrators of the forum. Until I realized, oh, damn, that's me. I was lying to myself for years, and but it took a few years until I finally accepted it. Even though I adopted the label quite early after realizing it, it took a few years until I accepted it fully.
Yeah, I think that's something we maybe learn from society, that asexuality is not natural, in quotation marks. You need sexual attraction to be happy in your life, and I can imagine that it might be hard to accept it in the beginning. I know that from my own story as well, that first you ask yourself, why can't I be as everyone else? And in the end, you can accept it fully, hopefully.
The weird thing is, when I was a teenager, I didn't have the word, but I knew that if I had the word, I would have accepted it right away, because I knew, okay, that this fits. Yeah, I would have known that it fits, and I was quite accepting of myself, but yeah, thanks to some unfortunate situations in my early 20s, I began to think I was broken.
Yeah, now you were talking a lot about your internal coming out. Maybe you can tell us a bit about, I don't know, external coming out. So have you talked to other people? I mean, you're very active on the A Spektrum Discord server, and you're also involved in Spektrum, another A podcast. But what about your family, your child, maybe your parents? Did you talk to them about it?
Not to many family members, because I don't have that much contact to my family, to my blood family, that is. To my chosen family, I have much contact. Those are friends and acquaintances, and close people that are close to me, and I'm quite open about my asexuality to them. They're accepting. My husband is he was one of the people I talked about quite early. He was one of the first I talked to, but he said, well, that explains a lot, but I sometimes have the impression that he tends to forget it, because there's sometimes he keeps talking to me in a way he talks to not asexual people, and it's it's a bit weird, when it comes to the child, I don't know how to address it in the proper terms yet, because the child is still 10. But I try to describe it when we talk about sexual orientations, love, and the other stuff. When it's sometimes a topic when we are watching movies, and there are kissing scenes or scenes where people are flirting, and the child and I have similar reactions. We both think of this as why, and the child does more explicit sounds. They say whack. Well, it's a child. I'm trying to explain to them that that's completely okay to not like it, and the other way around. It's also completely okay to like it, and if people like it, please don't do these wech sounds. Please don't. And for the moment, the child and I are accomplices in not liking sexual and romantic stuff in movies.
Very nice. Yeah, I can completely understand that it's not easy to talk to children about that topic, especially because there are so many terms that are important and you also don't want to confuse them. But I think, Simon, when we talked before, you said that you were already talking to your child about the topic. How did you do that?
It was a few weeks ago. He was asking me, so it came up, we were having a conversation, it came up that he asked me basically if I wanted a new girlfriend, and he was asking because his mum has a new boyfriend, and I hadn't prepared beforehand, so I didn't really have in mind how I would discuss that I was ace, or that I even would discuss it with him. So I think I did okay. I did not use the word, since I didn't think they would make much sense to him, meaning saying ace, so asexual, I'm romantic. But I explained how, so I answered his question, he said, do I want a new girlfriend? So I simply said no, but I did give a bit of explanation, which was that, so he is 10 years old, but his concept of what it means to be in a relationship, to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or to be married, I used that framework. So I said, if you're in a relationship, then you're really close in a way, and I do not want that. That what I want is friendship. And he seemed to understand that. And I think, saying that what I want is friendship, I mean, he's a child, so he knows what friends are. And I specifically told him that I don't want a girlfriend, like how he sees other adults and other parents and such. And then he wasn't so interested. Like I was obviously more invested in the conversation. Really, he just wanted to know if I asked him afterwards the next day, what aspect was he interested in, and really it was just he wanted to know if I wanted a new girlfriend. That was it.
Yeah, I think children are sometimes more accepting than maybe adults, because they don't have that much of heteronormative society in them. As we grow up, we get more and more for the society, and if children grow up with that it is maybe completely normal to not have a partner or to not be in a romantic relationship, then they also think that it is okay and accepted.
Yeah.
But I think it also depends on the age, because at a certain age, puberty, etc., then sometimes at school those typical heteronormative role models are rather exaggerated. So I think this innocent child attitude, maybe that's when they are younger, but at a certain point it's very difficult also when you're parent, because your child has also other influences, not only at home, but of course school and other social contexts, and they are full of norms and expectations, and it's very hard to ignore that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that in mind, because there was so as part of, I think, the next day, so also when I was speaking with my son, I asked him if he thought, so I have a couple of friends who are also ace, and we hang out a lot. And I asked him if he thought one of them was my girlfriend. And I found it really sweet that he just laughed at me and said, of course not. Because, okay, he picked up on our body language. He picked up on our body language, that we are not dating or the like. And that was really great. And so, okay, I have that in mind, though, because sure, as he's a teenager. So I was thinking of that now, because what if so I was, maybe I was thinking too many levels deep. I was thinking, okay, he sees his dad hanging out a lot with a woman. Maybe he thinks they're going out. And maybe when he's a teenager, maybe he would think that, that's what I was thinking. But as a 10-year-old, no, he doesn't have that idea anyway. And picks up on our body language. It's clear that we're not. So I found that really sweet.
Yeah, that's a nice story.
Maybe also something that could be interesting to talk about. Do you also talk to parents who are not A parents, or like in general, is it a topic when you talk to other parents, or are you more with your A friends?
I haven't yet, not from avoiding the subject intentionally, but it simply hasn't come up with other parents I know, meaning especially parents of my son's friends. I've been wearing this watch band since last summer with the Ace colours on it. So if any of them have recognised it, they haven't mentioned it. So it just hasn't come up. People I've spoken with, sure, other Ace people, of course, and also, so friends of mine who are themselves not parents. So I haven't really spoken about it in the context of being a parent.
Do you know any other A-spec parents?
No, at least not in person.
Yeah, I do. At least one. One of the members of our podcast is a parent, and is on the A-spec, on both A-specs. Yeah, but referring to the question you asked Simon before, whether we are talking about A-spec themes with other parents. With this parents, definitely, because we're working on a podcast. With other parents, it varies. With some, I'm talking about the topic because I like these people and I know I can talk openly about these things. But there are other parents who are difficult to talk to when it comes to such topics. Not that they are aphobic or something, but they have, I don't know how to put it in a nice way, they have small minds. Those are people who said that, in lesbian couples there is a man and a wife, a man and a woman, and there have these role models even in lesbian couples, and I said, no. I know one lesbian who says this, and I was rolling my eyes and thinking, okay, well, I don't have to explain this to you.
Yeah, sure.
You will get it. I live in a small part of Germany, so I live in a very rural part of Germany, so the minds are sometimes a little bit small.
Yeah, Carmen, one thing that is also interesting, you mentioned that with your husband sometimes it's a bit difficult because maybe he seems not to think permanently about the fact that you're on the A spectrum. How is it with you as a couple when you're walking in the streets? I don't know. Probably people will also read you as a heterosexual couple, I imagine. How does it affect you? Do you feel the need to talk to other people about the fact that your relationship is maybe not the way that they read it?
Actually, yeah, I have this impulse, but we are living apart, and he's in a new relationship, and I have my two cuddle buddies, as I call them. So yeah, well, I'm red. I'm straight passing, definitely. But it doesn't matter around the people I'm as in my bubble. It doesn't matter because everyone knows that I'm ace, and even if I'm cuddling with people, they know that it doesn't mean that I'm sexually attracted to them, and they know that I'm not heterosexual. So, well, and when it comes to strangers, I don't mind really. If they think I'm straight, well, it would affect me more if people that are close to me think that I'm straight than when it comes to strangers.
Yeah, maybe that's also that changes with the time. At least for me, I think in the beginning, I didn't care at all about the fact that many of my friends thought I was heterosexual. But then with the time, you see and you realize that it's an important part of your identity. And then at least I had more this need to talk about the topic just because there was something that affected my life in many ways, not only like personally, but also with regard to the podcast or, I don't know, other A meetings. So there are many things that I couldn't talk about anymore if I don't talk about my identity in that part.
Yeah. Well, around my friends, before I was coming out, before I realized, I wanted to clarify that I'm not really heterosexual, but I didn't know really that I wasn't. And I didn't know how to talk about this. I only knew that it felt uncomfortable if they thought of me as heterosexual. The moment I realized, I went out there to my friends and said, "Hey, did you know I realized this about me?" And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I would like to come back to one topic which is maybe a bit more general. Do you remember when, for the first time, you had the wish to have children? How did this come up? And maybe now that you know about your A identity, maybe, I don't know, would you think differently about it?
Because to say there are some people who say like, yeah, of course, having children is not for everyone. And I think especially on the A spec, there may be also a lot of people who don't have children because it's also made harder by society. Like there are a lot of disadvantages you have if you're not one of those heteronormative couples. But still, yeah. Did you, I guess, or maybe did you want to have children?
Me?
Yeah, both of you.
Not really. Well, it happened because I did not use contraceptives. Contraceptives for females. I didn't want to because I thought, well, why should I use hormones on my body just in case somebody wants sex with me? I didn't like this concept, but I was not that able to articulate that I wasn't that able to communicate about boundaries and things I wanted or didn't want. So I was not courageous enough to say, please use condoms. And I knew that, and I knew that it could happen, and said, well, if it happens, I'm taking the consequences and raise this child. And well, some of my friends said we are doing a good job. I'm trying my best, and the child is not responsible for me not wanting children. So, well, but my husband wanted, so well. And I'm quite lucky that it happened with him and not with other people who were less responsible.
Yeah. I think it's very, very touching what you just said. And also this reflects many of the fears, I would say, that many A people have when they are in, I don't know, relationships or when they have intimate contact to allosexual people who are maybe not that respective, or even if they try, they just cannot imagine what it means to be A and what you think and how much you feel pressured. So that's very, very honest, and thank you for sharing. Simon, how was it for you?
So until I was in my late 20s, I had no interest in having children at all. I have 4 younger siblings, so growing up, and they're like pretty spaced out, so growing up there were always these little babies around crying and smelling bad and such, so I had no interest in having children at all, but then in my late 20s, then I met my, who would become my wife, and her sister had a child. So basically then I was around some babies. I'd not been around them for more than 10 years. And so then I could see the good sides, like, oh yeah, they can actually be nice. And it is, at least from observing other people, other parents, I could see the benefits or the good side of being a parent. And then sure, who would become my wife, then she wanted children, and then I had these good experiences, and then I actually became kind of curious, what would it be like to be a parent? So then in our case, then we got married, and then a while later we had our son, and I was nervous, of course, but then I was really looking forward to it before he was born, and then once he was born, I was really glad to have him, and I took 2 years Elternsight, and it was really wonderful raising him. So, and it's still wonderful now. After 2 years, I needed to go back to work. But I would not have expected, as I say, as a child, as a teenager, in my 20s, I had no interest at all in being a parent. And then just as I got older and further away from it, then I really liked the idea.
Yeah, that's also nice. Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, and part of it was, did you ask? I think, so anyway, if I had known I was Ace, I don't think I would have had a child, because those things I mentioned are all true, but if I knew I was Ace, I would, I'm not going to have sex, so then maybe there's not going to be any children. And I wasn't so interested that I would want to, maybe now it's different, now I've actually been a parent, but back then at least I had no interest in adopting or anything like that. So in that regard, I'm very glad that I did not work out I was Ace until after my son was born.
But then for you say it's like separate, having children and your asexuality, or is it connected? Because you said maybe if you had known that you were Ace, you would not have wanted to have children. Mm-hmm. But I mean, raising a child is much more than your sexuality, I imagine.
Of course. And actually now that I'm older, now I actually like the idea of having another child. Yeah, so now it is separate, you're right. And just back then I had it linked together. Yeah, but by now it is a separate thing.
Right. Okay, maybe one more question, since we were talking about a-parenting, and maybe you also have some recommendations or some things that you want to say to other people who might become a-parents or who might become parents in general, or who are already parents.
Difficult. I can't think about anything. No.
Then maybe let's move on to another question that will maybe lead to something, like to an answer for this question also. Is there anything you wish for from maybe by society or other people as parents on the A-spec? Like maybe there's some certain challenges that you have to face because you're on the A-spec, dealing with institutions mainly, for example. Is there something that you wish for?
To go behind the scenes, you gave us some of these questions beforehand that we could prepare, and this was one where so far at least, I can't think of anything because, right now I'm not a single parent, I'm sharing custody of my son, but that would be more the kind of thing where, if you're, various like schools or doctors assume that I live with his mum, stuff like that, but that's just being divorced. That's nothing to do with being Ace. So I couldn't actually think of anything. I couldn't think of anything in response to your question.
I mean, that's maybe also something good if you don't have an answer to that question, because that might mean that you don't experience so many disadvantages because of being on the A-spec and a parent.
I mean, in my daily life, it doesn't come up. Yeah, I've read online, and I understand this can be a thing in the world that some people, it's a big part so meaning sexuality and romantic relationships, that's a big part of their daily conversation, and people have expectations of them and all kinds of things like that, yeah? So if that was the case, I can imagine it being more of an issue. And at least in my life, my whole life, yeah, not just the last couple of years, or the last year rather, since I learned I was ace, it's never been a big topic of conversation. And this is a difference of me being a man, I know, compared to being a woman. Basically, no one had expectations on me. My parents, society, they weren't like saying, hey, you need to get married, you need to have a child, anything like that. So because those things they weren't a part of my life before, and they haven't become a part of my life now.
I think having children is more about only the sexuality, but it's a lot more like institutional conditions that facilitate it or that make it more difficult. The question like, what happens if your child comes to elementary school in Germany and you're working 40 hours per week? How is that possible to combine? And maybe that's not that much related to the sexuality, that's true. Maybe we could record another podcast episode about having children in general in our patriarchal society today. But I think it's interesting to see that you personally, if you only regard the sexuality aspect or the fact that you're on the A spec, that this doesn't affect you as A parents that much.
So I don't think I said so far. So right, I'm sharing custody of my son, 50-50. So he's with me 3 days a week, and then with his mum 3 days a week, back and forth. And similar to actually when I was on parental leave, as you were mentioning, expectations or patriarchal expectations, basically it was seen as somehow a special thing that I had taken so much parental leave, yeah, and now also that I'm looking after, so being a parent to him. So the expectation at least still is a lot that in the case of divorced parents maybe, that the children will be with the mum most of the time and just with the dad on weekends or every other weekend or stuff like that. So definitely for me it's been easier because basically the expectations are so low. That's why it's been so easy on me. Yeah. So sure, I work a 40-hour week, but since March 2020, so since COVID, I've been able to work from home, and that's made things much easier. Yeah. So then when he comes home from school, I can be here. I don't need to sort out childcare or anything like that. So that made a big difference as well.
Yes, that's maybe something that is not so much connected to the A-spec, I suppose. But being a single parent, and especially male read by society.
Yeah, okay, I think we've been talking quite a while. And maybe to come to an end of this conversation, I would like to ask you, what was the most remarkable thing that you've been listening to while we were talking about the topic, or what is your takeaway from our conversation?
Or is there anything else you want to add, you want to talk about?
When we were preparing for this episode, I mentioned something that made me realize that helped me better realizing that I'm ace, and that was connected to me being a parent. You remember that? And I wanted to add this because I think it's important because many people don't know the difference between physical arousal and being attracted to a person or wanting sex with a person. And I was one of these people. I really believe that, okay, the body reacts, that means I want to have sex and I have to have sex. And I felt not good because my husband or former partners weren't getting that much sex from me, and I thought, well, okay, if my body reacts, I have to, and give it to them. And what made me realize a little bit that this connection is not always there was when I was breastfeeding. Because, well, if a child is, if you breastfeed a child, then the body down there reacts as well. It's reacting with physical arousal. You cannot do anything about this. And and back then I thought, oh well, my body reacts. What does this mean? And I remembered a TV show I saw as a teenager, where they were talking about it was about a couple, and he was accused of being a child molester because a child was sitting on his lap and playing, and his body reacted, and he couldn't do anything about it, and he was terrified, and his wife accused him of being interested in this child, and the moderator explained that there's a difference, that physical arousal doesn't mean that you want sex, and she made the she talked about breastfeeding as well, and that it can happen with breastfeeding. And while I was breastfeeding my child, I remembered, oh, okay, yeah, there was something, and this helped me a little bit more later when 3 years later, when I found out that I was Ace, because I was questioning a lot. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to remain in this, normal life, quotation marks, not normal life. And then I thought about everything that happened in my life that was related to sexuality, and I remembered this as well. So, okay, if your body reacted, and you didn't want sex back then, what about all the other situations? And I thought of every situations I could remember when I thought I wanted sex, and I realized, I read a scene in a book, and my body reacted, and I thought, oh, I have to. And it was never because I was attracted to a person. And this helped a lot. This really helped a lot. And this is a reason why I love these videos from Emily Nagoski, I guess she's called. She made some TED Talks about arousal. Arousal non-concordance. You can find this, for example, on embracesexualwellness.com. And and Emily Nagoski, I guess she's called, made a TED Talk about this. Yeah, Emily Nagoski, The Truth About Unwanted Arousal. It's a TED Talk, and it can be found on YouTube. I guess this is really helpful, not only for asexual people.
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic you talked about, and it's something many people don't know, that there is a difference between maybe how your body reacts to something and you really like your sexual desire that you're experiencing, or maybe you're not experiencing that. And that's maybe also a very good example how parenting affects what you actually, like what you know about yourself and how you maybe find out more about yourself and are aware of what you actually want.
Yeah, if I wasn't a parent, it would have taken me longer, I guess. A lot.
So I did not obviously have that physical reaction, but the thing that I was remembering now, so I looked into asexuality. I mentioned right at the start here that I searched for the word, and that's how I found the definition. And I remember now why I started even looking for it was basically that as a part of separating from my ex-wife, that I basically just made a list for myself. What do I want from a relationship? And when I made that list, there was nothing in there that was romantic or sexual in any way. It was basically a list of things that I want to do with my friends. And at the time I thought, okay, I'm just really upset about getting separated. So I thought, okay, but in a few months, a year or whatever, I'll be able to add to that list some romantic things, whatever. No, so I did not. And I think that now I remember that was the thing that made me look more into it.
Thank you for sharing. yeah, I think now we have come to the end of the interview. So if you have any comments, if you want to add anything, you can do that.
Just another thing. It would make sense when talking about things we want for our children from school. So specifically, I want my son to know about asexuality and aromantic, because I didn't know about that at all until I was 39. And had I known it earlier, that would have been pretty helpful. So especially if he is either or both of those things, but even if he's not, just that he knows about them, that friends of his or the world in general, but especially if he is, I want him to know what they are. Not that he needs to be mixed up for,
Yeah, that's very important what you're mentioning, like education at school. And unfortunately, in the normal school lessons, there is not a lot of diversity with regard to sexual orientation or gender identity. There are some projects, I'm active in one of these projects, where we go to school and implement workshops and talk to children about these topics. But still, of course, we don't reach all schools, and there is a lot of education needed. And yeah, hopefully maybe in the next years, also with social media, I always hope that there is more information coming to the children as well, so that they know some of the terms. At least when I'm in the schools and I ask, like, have you ever heard about asexuality, aromanticism? Aromanticism not that much, but asexuality is now a term that many have heard at least. Of course, they don't have the correct idea about it, and they have a lot of stereotypes and like, is it like people don't want to have sex, something like that? And I always correct it, but at least they have heard about it, and it's not a complete weird and new concept. So I think there is hope.
That's a very nice word to say for the end. There's hope and there's progress.
Yeah.
May I ask what age groups you're talking about? Fifth class or up?
Okay.
Or how old are these kids?
Yeah, we're only allowed to implement the workshops from the 8th grade to 12th or 13th grade in Germany, so from the age of 14 to maybe 19, 20 maximum. We also wanted to do it earlier, but since the project is funded by the Bundesland Hessen, there are some regulations that we have to follow. There are some Qualitätsstandards, and one of them is that we're not allowed to do it when they're not 14 years old. Yeah.
Because they might be afraid that children get sexualized or something, or learn too much about sexuality, or what?
I don't know if it's that they are specifically afraid, or if it's only that they're afraid by the reaction of the parents, because that's true. Mostly the problem. Also, there is Sexualkunde, for example, often in 6th grade already, and I've talked to some teachers and they say it's horrible because parents are always like, no, but you cannot talk to children about these topics and you're taking like influence. So there's a lot of fight.
I mean, that's where TV and films are helpful, because at least right now you can't legally in schools. I mean, like you're saying, you can't teach it or teach about it rather. But last week at the Nippon Connection, I saw a film called I Am What I Am. I mean, it's a film for adults, not for kids, but that was a film, and there were other TV shows and such where it's not an educational thing, but the characters themselves are ace or aro, and so then when kids watch such shows, they may know about things. I don't know of any German shows yet, but at least I know of that film.
I mean, it also doesn't make sense to say that if you don't have queer education, then there is no education, because there's always education. It's always heteronormative education. So if you add queer aspects, it's just like a complete picture, and it's not taking influence, because influence is taken anyway.
Mm-hmm. By kindergarten, in school, by other adults, in TV. By books. This is a difficult discussion. Yeah. And I want to add something before you forget it. People who are afraid that kids in their early teens, like 10, 11, 12, get information about sexuality and are, quotation marks, sexualized. forget that that is the age where most people first realize what sexual orientation they have. So, I mean, I was 12 when I realized that something was different about me. And if I had a word back then, I would have known that I was neither bisexual, nor homosexual, nor heterosexual. So, and I know people who know this way earlier. So,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, children are questioning anyway, and if you don't give them the words, then they just don't have the options to tick for them. So that's very, very important, not only by parents, but also by school, by books, by any form of education that is implemented in the society.
Okay, then I think we'll maybe stop the recording by now. It was very nice having you as guests. Thank you for sharing your stories and for being so open with us.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, then have a nice day, both of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for waking up early.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ja, jetzt haben wir lange über verschiedene Aspekte vom Thema A-Parenting gesprochen, wie es beispielsweise ist, A-Spekt zu sein und Kinder zu haben. Und wie immer, nach dem eigentlichen Inhalt der Folge, reden wir kurz darüber, was wir eigentlich mitgenommen haben. Franka, über was denkst du jetzt gerade noch nach?
Also ich muss sagen, mir gehen tatsächlich einige Sachen im Kopf herum. Ich fand das ein super inspirierendes Gespräch und auch unterschiedliche Perspektiven. Vor allem war das eben auch ein Thema, mit dem ich persönlich jetzt noch nicht wirklich in Kontakt war, weil das für mich auch noch keine Rolle gespielt hat. Aber ich glaube, der Aspekt, der mir vermutlich am längsten in Erinnerung bleiben wird, war, als Carmen erzählt hat, welcher Druck auf Carmen lastete zu dem Zeitpunkt, wo Carmen vielleicht noch nicht Nein sagen konnte in manchen Situationen, beziehungsweise wo einfach einerseits dieser Wunsch, nicht hormonell zu verhüten, was ich absolut nachvollziehen kann, und gleichzeitig aber dann auch praktisch, dass man dann der Partnerperson mitteilen muss, okay, ja, dann musst du aber Kondome benutzen, und dass das einfach echt schwierig ist, das rüberzubringen. Und ich fand das sehr heftig, dass Carmen dann eben auch erzählt hat, ja, dieses mit den Konsequenzen leben zu werden. Okay, ich bin tatsächlich bereit, die Konsequenzen hinzunehmen und dann auch ein Kind großzuziehen. Das hat mich sehr bewegt, und ich finde, das zeigt auch nochmal sehr, welcher Druck teilweise auf A-Personen in Beziehungen oder in jeglichen intimen Konstellationen lastet, wenn eben eine Alu-Person dabei ist, die vielleicht noch nicht komplett weiß, was Asexuality oder Aromanticism eigentlich bedeutet. Und selbst wenn die Person Bescheid weiß, was es bedeutet, heißt es ja noch lange nicht, dass tatsächlich auch das Vertrauen da ist, um so etwas einfordern zu können, wie eben ja mit Kondomen zu verhüten.
Ja, das ist auf jeden Fall ein eindrücklicher Punkt. Also ja, da denke ich bestimmt auch noch länger drüber nach. Alan, wie sieht es denn bei dir aus? Was hast du mitgenommen aus dem Gespräch heute?
Ja, ich denke auch vor allem im Moment über die Frage nach, wie redet man mit seinem Kind über Asexualität und Aromantik, und auch der Gedanke, dass vielleicht jetzt Heteropaare sich diesen Gedanken überhaupt nicht stellen müssen oder sich darüber nicht nachdenken, und dass es vielleicht besser wäre, wenn alle Menschen mit ihren Kindern über generell queere Themen, aber auch Asexualität und Aromantik reden würden, weil das eben einerseits den Kindern einfach einen besseren, vielleicht eine vollständigere Sicht auf die Welt geben würde, dass sie andere Menschen besser verstehen, dass sie auch sich selbst besser verstehen, dass eben Leute nicht mehr 20, 30, 40 oder noch älter sind, bevor sie wissen, dass sie asexuell sind, dass Leute sich nicht ewig lang Gedanken machen müssen, ist irgendwas falsch mit mir, was ist los mit mir? Also einfach das generell einfach mit Kindern darüber zu reden, egal ob man selbst asexuell ist oder nicht, vielleicht einfach sehr hilfreich sein könnte.
Ja, es wäre definitiv schön, wenn es da mehr Awareness gäbe. Mo, was denkst du gerade?
Ja, da kann ich mich eigentlich direkt nur anschließen. Gerade als es gegen Ende um die Unterschiede zwischen Attraktion und Erektion geht oder auch um den Schulunterricht, den Sexualkundenunterricht, ist mir eingefallen oder ist mir nochmal klar geworden, deutlich geworden, wie sehr eigentlich Asexualitäten oder Aromantiken in der Schule gerade eigentlich ja auch für jüngere Kinder in der 6. Klasse aufwärts eine besondere wertvolle Sichtweise auf körperliche, auf Biologie geben kann, auch auf Sexualitäten geben kann. Im Grunde genommen könnten Asexualitäten als eigentlich der Beweis dargestellt werden, dass es diese Trennung überhaupt gibt. Also die Existenz von asexuellen Menschen meine ich damit. Und das wäre eigentlich auch ein super Punkt, um so ein Thema in den Unterricht einzubauen, ohne dass irgendwie, ich meine, das ist an sich schon keine Suggerierung, dass irgendjemand asexuell sein muss, ja. Aber das wäre eine relativ sachliche Auslegung der ganzen Sache. Das finde ich sehr spannend. Hat mich inspiriert.
Ja, vielen Dank euch für eure Einschätzung und nochmal eure Reflexion zu unserem heutigen Thema. Und jetzt haben wir natürlich wie immer unser Piece of Cake und das hat diesmal Momo für euch mitgebracht.
Ganz genau. Ich habe mich, bevor wir die Folge aufgenommen haben, mit wissenschaftlicher Literatur zu dem Thema Asexual Parenting oder Aromantic Parenting beschäftigt. Ich habe einiges gefunden tatsächlich, was in diesem großen Kosmos sich bewegt, aber besonders aufgefallen ist mir der Text Asexuality and its Implications for LGBTQ Parent Families von Megan Carroll, PhD Megan Carroll aus der California State University. Megan Carroll ist eine Person, welche an sich sehr viel zu Asexualitäten auf Englisch veröffentlicht, also da sehr spannend, vielleicht mal nach dem Namen aussuchen. Der Text an sich beschäftigt sich mit dem wissenschaftlichen Stand bis heute und bezieht sich auf die Potenziale, welche die Forschung hat in diesem Bereich. Es ist leider nicht sehr viel Forschung vorhanden, die stattgefunden hat, aber dieser Text fasst eben nicht nur sehr gut den wissenschaftlichen Stand zur Asexualität an sich zusammen, was schon eine super Leistung ist. Er arbeitet auch intersektional, also mit Class, Race und Ähnlichem und stellt sehr viele kritische Fragen und darüber bin ich sehr begeistert. Das ist ein bisschen längerer Text, zumindest in wissenschaftlichen Verhältnissen, also 32 Seiten, aber ich kann es wirklich sehr empfehlen, den zu lesen und ich denke mal, wir können in den Shownotes auch einen Link
zugestellt
steht, wo ich den habe verlinken, damit ihr ihn finden könnt.
Ja, vielen Dank dir. Das war's auch schon wieder für heute. Wir hatten großen Spaß bei der Aufnahme. Ich hoffe, ihr ebenso beim Zuhören und bis bald.
Und meldet euch immer gerne bei uns, wenn ihr vielleicht selber A-Parent sein oder A-Parents werden möchtet oder auch nicht. Meldet euch gerne, gebt uns Feedback. Wir freuen uns immer über Kommentare, über eure Nachrichten. Ja, und dann bis zum nächsten Mal.
Tschüss.
Tschüss.